All right, everybody, welcome back. We're diving right into a topic that's been causing quite a stir across the pond in the UK.
Yeah, big changes over there.
It has to do with puberty blockers and the way they're used with young people who are dealing with gender dysphoria. Definitely complex stuff with strong opinions all around, so let's unpack it all together and see what we can learn.
Sounds good to me.
To start, I think we should lay out exactly what the UK government decided. Basically, they put an indefinite ban on prescribing puberty blockers to anyone under 18 experiencing gender dysphoria.
Unless they're getting treatment through the National Health Service.
Right. And it kind of builds on some emergency measures that were already in place, but this takes things a step further. What do you make of that?
Well, I think for anyone who isn't totally up to speed on this, it's important to understand that these medications, these puberty blockers, they essentially hit pause on puberty. It gives young people more time to figure out their gender identity before any physical changes happen that they can't reverse.
That makes sense. But this ban didn't just appear out of thin air, right?
No, definitely not. It's heavily based on what the Commission on Human Medicine's recommended, the CHM for short.
CHM.
They're like the UK's top advisory group when it comes to medication safety, making sure that anything used in the UK is both effective and safe. That's their whole thing.
So a pretty important group then. And after looking at all the evidence, they came to the conclusion that the way puberty blockers are currently being prescribed, well, it presents an unacceptable safety risk, especially for kids and teenagers. Those were their words.
Yeah, and to really grasp what that conclusion means, it's important to look at the specific risks they're talking about. They're worried about potential long-term problems, like effects on bone density, how it could impact brain development, and there's just not enough research into the long-term psychological impacts of stopping puberty at such a crucial point in development. Those are some serious concerns.
Definitely red flags there. And it seems like the UK's Health and Social Care Secretary, Wes Streeting, is taking all this very seriously.
From what I've read, yeah.
In his statement, he emphasized that the government needs to act with caution when it comes to this vulnerable group of young people. He also made it clear that all decisions about health care for children have to be evidence-led. That seems to line up with what the CHM was saying about having a solid foundation of evidence for these kinds of medical treatments.
For sure. It seems like the government's putting a big emphasis on doing things by the book and being extra cautious. Streeting even said they're working on creating new services for gender identity and setting up a clinical trial specifically to figure out a solid evidence base for using puberty blockers. So they're not just ignoring the needs of transgender youth, but they're trying to find a way forward that puts both care and safety front and center.
Having a clinical trial seems like a smart move. It could give them the data they need to make better decisions in the future. But the CHM isn't the only voice weighing in on this. The Cass Review, a big examination of children's gender care in the UK, led by Dr. Hilary Cass, seems to agree with the government's stance.
Yeah, Dr. Cass, she's a big name in pediatrics, very well respected. And in her review, she called puberty blockers powerful drugs with unproven benefits and significant risks.
Sounds familiar.
Definitely echoes the CHM's concerns. She went on to say that these medications should only be given after a thorough multidisciplinary assessment, like a whole team of different specialists need to weigh in.
Okay, so not a decision to be made lightly.
Exactly. And even then, it should only happen within the framework of a formal research protocol.
Wow, so both the CHM and Dr. Cass are pushing for a super measured, research-focused approach. It looks like the government's listening. But this is one of those decisions that's never going to have everyone on board. We've seen some pretty significant protests from trans rights activists who are strongly opposed to the ban.
Absolutely. And it's vital to understand where they're coming from, too. They argue that for some transgender young people, puberty blockers can be absolutely crucial, like a lifeline. It can offer relief from really intense gender dysphoria, potentially improving their mental health. They worry that the ban is cutting off access to essential care and could make things worse for vulnerable young people.
It's tough because denying access to care, especially for young people already going through so much, that can have really negative consequences.
No doubt. And a lot of activists are pushing for a more personalized approach. They feel that decisions about puberty blockers should be made on a case-by-case basis, with the young person, their family, and a team of qualified healthcare professionals all working together. Informed consent is another big thing for them. making sure that young people fully understand the potential risks and benefits before making any decisions about medical intervention.
So we've got the government and groups like the CHM stressing caution and needing evidence-based practices, and then we've got activists highlighting the very real needs and experiences of transgender youth. It doesn't seem like there are any easy answers here, and both sides bring up valid points.
It definitely highlights the complexities of this whole issue. There are legitimate worries about the safety and long-term effects of medical interventions, especially when we're talking about young people who are still developing. But on the other hand, you have transgender youth who are searching for support and affirmation as they figure out their gender identity. And for some, that journey might involve things like puberty blockers. The real challenge is finding the right balance, a way to be cautious, while also addressing the individual needs of transgender youth.
I think we need to be having more open and honest conversations about this, conversations that include all sides. It also makes you think, if access to puberty blockers is being restricted, what other support systems can be put in place to help trans youth navigate their gender identity and their mental well-being? That's something we need to think about.
I agree. This is a discussion that needs to happen across society. We need to explore all the options, really listen to the people who are directly affected, and work towards solutions that put the health and well-being of all young people first.
Well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to chew on. It's a reminder that even when we're dealing with really complex and emotionally charged issues, it's so important to stay informed, look at things from different perspectives, and keep talking to each other. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.